Star Wars Rebels. This show was one of my favorite shows when it first premiered. It was a little bit kid-friendly in the beginning, but, as the show went on, it kind of found its voice and became more mature. Obviously by season 4, there's a lot of death and sacrifice and, especially with, the characters of like Kanan and Ezra, which was like, super, super crazy. But yeah, I definitely really enjoyed it. Overall, I thought this was like a great series. Didn't really have too many problems with it. First season, like I said before, is kind of like where they were trying to like find their footing and everything, kind of establish the characters, establish like who they are in the universe. Since this was an animated show, they kind of had to have that younger audience in mind and everything. So yeah, I completely understand the tone that they wanted to set with that. I guess because, like with Clone Wars, obviously it was during the middle of like the Clone Wars. So obviously that show was like very, very more mature in its tone. So when it came to Star Wars Rebels, like my expectations were like really, really high to kind of see like, oh shoot, we're going to see, what happens right before A New Hope. We get to see kind of everything post Revenge of the Sith, how the Empire is like in power and how this rebellion's kind of slowly but surely starting to kind of bubble up and everything. So yeah, I guess my expectations were like really, really high. But I know you kind of have to have that relationship with the characters, kind of know who they are. You have to kind of play to your audience and everything since this is animation. And this is like the first thing that Disney Star Wars has kind of done. You kind of want to get that younger audience involved, kind of get that next generation involved in Star Wars. So yeah, I completely understand that. Yeah, I'm just glad that Dave Filoni decided to kind of mature the tone as it went along. The character of Ezra Bridger, he starts off as kind of like the street rat character, kind of like Aladdin in Aladdin. He doesn't know anything about the Force. He doesn't know really anything about the fall of the Republic or about the rise of the Empire. He's kind of really much on like the fringes of society with Lothal. Yeah, it totally makes sense that he would kind of be this kind of bratty teenager, so to speak, and he gets brought into this group of this small band of rebels, and he kind of matures as the show goes on. So yeah, I really appreciated that the show kind of reflected the main character, how he starts off very immature at first, and then he kind of grows into maturity, becomes a Jedi, and then eventually sacrifices himself for the rebellion, having those giant octopus monsters take over Thrawn's ship and then send him off into hyperspace, which is really cool. And then I'm glad that they're going to be bringing him back up in the Ahsoka show, and then we can kind of finish off that storyline with him, just because he's a great character, and I'm glad that he had his great run in Rebels, and then he gets to continue on into Ahsoka. So yeah, I'm glad to see that. Yeah, I guess my only like criticism was that the animation style was a little bit rough in the beginning. It felt very kind of like robotic in a way, kind of like what I was saying before. This is like the first Star Wars animated show under Disney's regime, so it kind of makes sense that they kind of want to stray away from the Clone Wars animation, where they said they were inspired by, I think it was called like Thunderbirds or something like that. It was kind of like the puppet style animation with the Clone Wars, so that makes sense. And then this one's a little bit more like the edges are a little bit more rounded, the animation's a little bit more flowing, not as stiff as Clone Wars at times, but it was a little bit rough in the beginning. But I don't fault Dave Filoni for that. I know not only is he trying to find his footing with the writing and like the setting and the characters, but also with this new animation style. So yeah, I totally give him a pass for that. But yeah, that was like really my only like critique with that. Honestly, don't really have too many things I would change about Rebels. I guess my only thing is maybe like they would just take a little bit more time to kind of like develop the characters earlier on, kind of give them more depth. It can be, family friendly, but not too like childish. I appreciate they kind of took like the Harry Potter route where, they have like the characters and the tone kind of be more family friendly, and then it matures as it goes on. But maybe just have a little bit more of that darkness in season 1, and just have those episodes have more like stakes in those earlier episodes to kind of, get that kind of hardcore Star Wars audience involved, as well as bring in the next generation of fans. So that was like really my only critique. I don't really do too many things to change it. But yeah, overall, Rebels is a great show. I enjoyed watching it, enjoyed all 4 seasons. And like I said before, the first couple episodes were a little, kid friendly, a little bit on like the slower side, not as many stakes going on. But yeah, overall, really enjoyed it. And yeah, I think they did a good job. All right, so now we move on to the Clone Wars season 7. So I thought this was like one of the best seasons of the Clone Wars. Like my overall thoughts on Clone Wars was, just like a great series. I know we had the movie, which was, not the best. But yeah, as far as the series, obviously the first couple seasons were, a little like hit or miss. Just kind of like with any of the Star Wars animated shows, you kind of have to like find your footing, kind of set the tone, and kind of like grow as the show goes on. By the time they're introducing, like Cad Bane and, like the whole like bounty hunter storyline, and then, when Darth Maul came in, like that was like really where the show kind of took off. I think from like season 5 onwards is like really where I got like really into the show. As soon as they introduced Darth Maul, his whole storyline, I thought that was like really, really compelling. So I'm glad that they kind of like not necessarily like wrapped up his story, but ended his kind of Clone Wars era storyline in this show. And then obviously like with Ahsoka, that whole cliffhanger that we had, I think in season 6, Rex, where she's brought back on the Jedi Council, but then she kind of turns her back and, kind of goes her own way. I thought it was really, really interesting. But yeah, I guess like my only like criticism was just like some of the episodes felt like a little bit unnecessary. I think like the whole like kind of like Martez sister storyline, could have been cut out. I guess the only reason why they had it in there was because they had to really show what Ahsoka was up to while she was excommunicated from the Jedi Council, and kind of see like what it's like, outside of the temple, see like how normal people are affected by the reign of like the Separatists and the Republic during the Clone Wars and everything, to kind of give like a ground level view of like what's going on. But yeah, those were kind of the episodes that I wasn't really compelled by. Like obviously like the last couple episodes where we see kind of like the ending of Darth Maul's kind of reign with his all of his faction, the kind of like the resolution, the Mandalorians and everything. I thought it was like really, really awesome. And then kind of like the tie-ins to Revenge of the Sith. Like I thought it was really, really interesting, the fact that the Clone Wars, obviously the Clone Wars ends at the end of Revenge of the Sith. So it's kind of cool seeing it in animated form, where like we're not necessarily following the primary characters like Anakin and Obi-Wan, but we're kind of following Ahsoka during this whole time, and like Rex and all the other clones as well, seeing them be affected by Order 66 and taking out all the Jedi, and how Ahsoka is kind of dealing with all that. Technically she's not a Jedi anymore, but she's still like a Force user. She still uses a lightsaber, and just seeing her and Rex kind of work together to kind of figure out like what's going on. Everything that happened on the ship and as it was going down. I thought that was just like a really interesting touch that they would do that, because at first I didn't think that they were going to have like a parallel storyline going on with season 7 during the events of Revenge of the Sith. I thought it was just kind of be its own kind of storyline, kind of leading into Revenge of the Sith, where like maybe it ends with the capture of Chancellor Palpatine, General Grievous swooping in and taking Chancellor Palpatine, kind of like they did in like the micro series version. I thought it was going to kind of be like a CGI recreation of that, and then kind of lead into the events of Revenge of the Sith. But I think it was kind of cool that it was happening during the events of Revenge of the Sith. And the fact that they had like dialogue that was happening during that movie, and you kind of see like continuations of scenes like before they cut off in the movie, kind of see where they went. And it totally makes sense that Ahsoka was there during that time, kind of seeing like her backstory. They didn't like retcon anything where it's like, wait, Ahsoka couldn't have been there. Like I didn't see her in the movie. Like where it was, like what? But yeah, Dave Filoni, he's definitely a master storyteller. He knows Star Wars. He knows like what works, what doesn't. He's just like a mastermind at everything. I talk to my friends about this all the time, but like maybe he should like run Lucasfilm. I know he's in charge of like Lucasfilm Animation, and he's like doing a great job with all of his shows there. But I mean, it would be really cool if like Dave Filoni and like Jon Favreau were like the new chief creative officer and the new like chief executive officer of Lucasfilm. As of this recording, there's news of like Bob Iger has replaced Bob Chapek as the CEO of Disney once again. So there's kind of rumors like, oh shoot, is Kathleen Kennedy going to be fired or anything? I know Bob Iger's motto is that he wants everything to kind of be more creatively driven instead of money driven, kind of like what Bob Chapek was doing a little bit. But yeah, that would be really interesting if like Dave Filoni took over Lucasfilm as chief creative officer, and then Jon Favreau kind of came in as a new chief executive officer. So I mean, we'll see what happens with that. As for now, I'm just glad that he is where he is at Lucasfilm, telling amazing stories, like Tales of Jedi. But for now, yeah, back to Clone Wars. Yeah, I think like my only criticism really, was just kind of like that whole Martez storyline. And I think if I were to change anything, like I think if they were to have like a full-on 22 episode season of Clone Wars, it would have been really cool. Just see more of it and just have more storylines, just more stuff kind of leading into Revenge of the Sith or events during Revenge of the Sith. But I know they're really just trying to have like, kind of like a mini season. I think there's like 12 episodes in this season. So they really kind of wanted to just streamline the story a little bit more and, kind of just wrap up the series, because I know they didn't really get that opportunity with season 6 because, obviously Disney bought Lucasfilm, and then, they had to cancel it because it was on Cartoon Network, which is owned by Warner Brothers. And then I know they had like a couple episodes that were on Netflix, like the lost episodes, to kind of wrap up that story. But yeah, I'm so glad that Dave Filoni got the opportunity to wrap up his story and, kind of like a compelling ending, not only to the Clone Wars within the universe, but just the Clone Wars series in general, with just like an amazing epic conclusion, and then kind of plant the seeds for, what Ahsoka Tano might be doing later on in her shows, and, all the cameos that she makes, like in Rebels and Mandalorian and all that. Kind of going back to Rebels, I'm glad that he got to kind of end the show on his terms with that show as well. Hopefully we can kind of get more Dave Filoni stuff in the future. But yeah, I'm just glad he is where he is, and, he did an amazing job wrapping up the Clone Wars series. So yeah, not really too much to change with that one.